My God, how can this be happening now? David Wellington yelled into the phone, his voice echoing through the hallways of the 45th floor of Wellington Industries. The millionaire CEO paced back and forth in his glass office, watching through the huge windows as the Chinese delegation stepped out of the 3 black cars parked at the entrance of the building. The official translator had just called to cancel at the last minute, a family emergency that couldn't wait. In 15 minutes, executives from China's largest technology company would be sitting in the conference room to finalize a $200 million contract. $200 million that depended entirely on perfect communication. Mr. Wellington, I've tried every translator in the city, said Rebecca, his executive assistant, with the phone still glued to her ear. No one is available for a meeting of this magnitude on such short notice. David loosened his Italian tie, feeling sweat bead on his forehead. 20 years building Wellington Industries, and it could all come crashing down because of a language barrier. The Chinese were known for their strict communication protocols. They would never tolerate a meeting conducted through translation apps or improvised gestures. Then a soft, almost whispered voice echoed from the corner of the room. Excuse me, Mr. Wellington, but I speak fluent Mandarin. All eyes turned to Jasmine Parker, 28, who had paused her cleaning routine to listen to the conversation. She held a cleaning cloth in her hands and wore the standard navy blue uniform of the maintenance staff. Jasmine had been working on the executive floors for 3 years, always discreet, always efficient, always invisible to most of the important people who circulated there. The silence that followed was so deep that you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Rebecca was the first to react, letting out a nervous laugh. Jasmine, this isn't a joke. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar international deal. David studied her for a moment, as if seeing her for the first time. You speak Mandarin? He asked, his voice heavy with skepticism and a hint of desperation. Mandarin, Cantonese, and a little Taiwanese, Jasmine replied calmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. I studied Oriental linguistics at Howard University before I started working here. Jasmine was 28 years old and had never imagined that 3 years cleaning these executive offices would prepare her for a moment like this. But all that time, while wiping down conference tables, she had listened to every conversation, absorbed every strategy, watched every move these executives made. Especially Rebecca. Rebecca's expression quickly changed from amusement to irritation. David, you can't be serious. A cleaning lady conducting the most important meeting of the year. But David was desperate. There was something about Jasmine's posture, the quiet confidence in her voice, that made him hesitate. Prove it, he said abruptly. Say something in Mandarin. Jasmine took a deep breath and began to speak in perfect Mandarin, her impeccable pronunciation echoing around the room. Women han rongxing nung zai zhili jianmian, shiwang women de huzwa hui dai lai huli de jegua. David was speechless. Even though he didn't understand a word, he could sense the natural fluency, confidence, and authority in her voice. What did you say? He asked, still processing what he had just heard. That it's an honor to meet you here and we hope our cooperation will bring mutually beneficial results, Jasmine translated. It's a very respectful standard business greeting in Chinese culture. Rebecca crossed her arms, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was taking. David, think about it. What will the Chinese think when they see that you brought a cleaning lady to an executive meeting? At that moment, a memory flashed through Jasmine's mind like lightning. 6 months ago, she had found Rebecca in the executive bathroom crying on the phone, talking to someone about that black girl who hangs around the important meetings. At the time, Jasmine had pretended not to hear, but she had remembered every word. For a moment that seemed like an eternity, David watched Jasmine. There was something in her eyes, a deep intelligence, a quiet dignity that contrasted sharply with the way everyone treated her on a daily basis. For 3 years, she had cleaned these rooms, listened to these conversations, absorbed more about the workings of the company than many executives. You have 20 minutes to get yourself together, David finally said, ignoring Rebecca's shocked stare. Put on something appropriate and meet me in the conference room. As Jasmine hurried out to get ready, Rebecca whispered furiously, You've completely lost your mind. When this backfires, it will be the end of your career. But David wasn't listening. For the first time in years, he was about to discover that the most valuable people are sometimes the ones who go unnoticed right under our noses. What none of them knew was that Jasmine had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone could have imagined. And Rebecca, with all her arrogance and thinly veiled prejudice, was about to discover that underestimating someone based on appearances can be the biggest mistake a person can make. If you're enjoying this story of overcoming adversity and are curious to find out how a cleaning lady can completely change the game in a room full of executives, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out what happens when talent meets its opportunity to shine. 20 minutes later, when Jasmine returned to the conference room, the silence was immediate and awkward. She had changed out of her uniform and into a black outfit borrowed from the receptionist, simple but appropriate. Her hair was pulled back into an elegant bun, and she carried a notepad like any other executive. "Jesus Christ," muttered Thomas, the CFO, not trying to hide his surprise. "Is that really the same person?" Rebecca didn't bother to lower her voice when she whispered to the assistant, "You can put a jewel in a piece of coal, but it's still coal inside." The Chinese delegation had arrived on time. 5 impeccably dressed executives waited in the elegant glass-walled room, chatting among themselves in Mandarin as they took in the view of Manhattan. David made the formal introductions, deliberately omitting Jasmine's current title. "This is Jasmine Parker, our international relations specialist for the Asian market," he said, each word carefully chosen. The delegation leader, Mr. Chun, greeted Jasmine with a respectful bow. When she responded in perfect Mandarin, thanking him for the honor of meeting them and praising their punctuality, a highly valued virtue in Chinese culture, his eyes lit up with genuine surprise and approval. For the first 15 minutes, Jasmine translated every nuance with surgical precision. Not just the words, but the cultural tones, the diplomatic implications, even little jokes that made the Chinese laugh genuinely. The meeting flowed with a naturalness that no one had expected. That was when Rebecca decided to intervene. "Jasmine," she interrupted with a venomous smile, "perhaps we should explain to our guests her unique career path at the company." David shot her a warning glance, but Rebecca continued, "It's just so inspiring to see someone reinventing themselves like that. Moving up in life, so to speak." The condescending tone was unmistakable. Jasmine felt the familiar weight of humiliation, that feeling she had known since she was 18, when she had to drop out of Howard University in the middle of her junior year because her diabetic mother had lost her job and needed someone to take care of her and pay the medical bills. "Life teaches us that opportunities can come in unexpected ways," Jasmine replied calmly, keeping her dignity intact as Mr. Chun watched the exchange with growing confusion. "But really, who would have thought that someone who was cleaning these very rooms 3 years ago would be sitting at this table today?" She paused to let the information sink in for the Chinese. "It really demonstrates how our company values diversity in all its forms." The silence that followed was devastating. Jasmine saw Mr. Chen's expression change subtly, not exactly contempt, but an uncomfortable surprise that made her stomach tighten. In Chinese culture, professional hierarchies were taken very seriously. David quickly interjected, "What Rebecca meant is that we value talent wherever we find it." But the damage was done. For the next 15 minutes, Jasmine felt the Chinese executives' glances shift. They were still polite, still translating when necessary, but the ease was gone. She had become a curiosity, not a professional. It was at that moment that something inside her crystallized. For 3 years, she had cleaned these rooms while executives discussed strategies, closed deals, and made decisions that moved millions. She had absorbed every word, every tactic, every mistake they made. Especially Rebecca's mistakes. Like the time Rebecca lied about quarterly sales figures to impress a client. Or when she took credit for a project that was entirely developed by a subordinate who was later fired for budgetary reasons. Or when she used confidential information for her own personal negotiations. Jasmine had seen everything. Heard everything. And more importantly, he had kept everything. The meeting ended with a tentative preliminary agreement. The Chinese promised to carefully consider the proposal diplomatic code for maybe, if we don't find something better. When the delegation left, Rebecca couldn't hide her satisfaction. "Well, that was interesting," she said, arranging her papers with exaggerated movements. "Maybe next time we should be more transparent about our team's qualifications from the outset." David was visibly furious, but before he could respond, Jasmine rose calmly. "Rebecca," she said, her voice soft but laden with a new authority, "Mr. Chin mentioned something interesting before he left." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Oh really? Like what?" "He said he was impressed with my fluency but confused by the hierarchical dynamics of the meeting." Jasmine paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "He asked if I could call him later to clarify some Cultural aspects of our presentation. Rebecca's expression changed subtly. What aspects? Mainly why the person responsible for translation wasn't introduced as the lead negotiator, considering that in their culture, whoever speaks the language automatically assumes the position of authority. Jasmine smiled softly. He said he'd like to better understand our organizational structure before making a final decision. Rebecca's face paled slightly as she processed the implications. For 3 years, Jasmine had been invisible. But invisibility, she was about to discover, can be the most powerful weapon of all, especially when you've been watching, learning, and preparing for the right moment to step out of the shadows. What Rebecca didn't know was that every insult, every humiliation, every attempt at sabotage was only fueling something far more dangerous than simple resentment. It was creating a strategist who knew every weakness, every secret, every lie that circulated through those corridors of power. 2 hours after the disastrous meeting, Jasmine was back in her navy blue uniform, pushing her cart through the executive hallways. But this time, every move was calculated. For 3 years, she had mentally mapped every important conversation, every whispered secret, every document left carelessly on desks. Especially Rebecca's. "Look who's back where she belongs," Rebecca commented loudly enough for all the executives in the hallway to hear as she chatted with Jennifer from accounting. "After that pathetic charade today, at least we know where everyone really belongs." Jasmine continued cleaning, but her hands moved automatically as her mind registered every word. Rebecca had no idea that during those 3 years, while cleaning her office, Jasmine had seen personal emails left open, phone conversations about contract manipulation, and most importantly, those documents Rebecca hid in her bottom drawer, documents about unfair competition against smaller companies. "You know what bothers me the most?" Rebecca continued, clearly showing off to Jennifer. David actually thought that a cleaning lady could save a $200 million deal. As if 3 years cleaning bathrooms qualified her to sit at the table with real executives. It was at that moment that Jasmine's phone vibrated discreetly. A message from an unknown number, but in Chinese characters she recognized immediately. It was from Mr. Chen. "Ms. Parker, I would like to talk to you privately about our company and your future opportunities. Could we meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Mandarin Cafe on 42nd Street? I have a proposal that may interest you." Jasmine's heart raced. This wasn't just about translation, it was about so much more. During the meeting, she had realized that Mr. Chen was evaluating not only her linguistic fluency, but her business acumen, her poise, her dignity under pressure. That night, in her small Brooklyn apartment, Jasmine opened a file on her computer that she had been building for 2 years. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Every company has its dirty secrets, and 3 years invisible in the corridors of power had given her access to information that could rock foundations. The file, titled Wellington Industries Irregularities, contained 63 pages of meticulously collected evidence. Printed emails that Rebecca thought she had deleted, call logs recorded by the security system when she worked on weekends, and most importantly, photos of documents proving how Rebecca had deliberately sabotaged 3 contracts with companies run by black people in the last 18 months. Jasmine had seen Rebecca lie to clients, take credit for projects developed by others, and most importantly, use her position to block promotions for employees she considered inappropriate for the company's image. The next day, at 10 o'clock sharp, Jasmine arrived at Café Mandarin wearing a simple but elegant outfit she had bought with her first college savings. Mr. Chun was already waiting, accompanied by an elegant woman who introduced herself as Lisa Wang, the group's vice president of international development. "Miss Parker," Mr. Chin began in English, but then switched naturally to Mandarin. "Yesterday I observed not only your linguistic fluency, but something much more valuable, your composure under undue pressure." Lisa leaned forward. "Our company is expanding operations in North America. We need someone who understands both Chinese culture and American business dynamics. Someone who has observed how business really works from the inside. And someone," Mr. Chin added with a knowing smile, "who has the dignity not to bow down to small people in big positions." For 2 hours, Jasmine spoke fluently about market strategies, cultural differences in negotiations, and especially how American companies often underestimated the sophistication of Asian investors. She subtly mentioned a few irregularities she had observed at competing companies, without naming names. When Lisa slid a business card across the table, Jasmine read, "Parker and Associates, International Consulting." Below that was an annual salary that was 5 times what she earned at Wellington Industries. "Consider our offer," said Mr. Chun, standing up. "But we have one specific condition. We'd like you to start by helping us investigate certain discrepancies we've discovered in Wellington Industries contracts. Apparently, there is evidence of questionable practices that violate federal international trade regulations." Jasmine held the card with steady hands. For 3 years, she had been treated like furniture. Now, 2 of Asia's most brilliant business minds were offering her not just a job, but a strategic alliance. "There's an emergency meeting at Wellington Industries tomorrow," Lisa said quietly. "We've learned that the Chinese delegation has filed a formal complaint about contract irregularities. It might be worth your while to attend." That night, Jasmine called her mother. "Mom, remember how you always said that patience is a smart woman's most powerful weapon?" "Of course, honey. Why?" "I think I finally understand what you meant." As she hung up the phone, Jasmine looked out her apartment window at the Manhattan skyline. Tomorrow Rebecca and all of Wellington Industries would discover that 3 years of invisibility had created something far more dangerous than a resentful employee. They had forged a strategist who knew every weakness, every lie, every secret of that company. And unlike the executives who underestimated people based on appearances, Jasmine had learned that true strength comes from observing, planning, and acting at the exact moment when her opponents least expect it. The next morning, the executive boardroom at Wellington Industries was buzzing with palpable tension. David had called an emergency meeting with the entire board after receiving an official report from the Chinese delegation about serious contractual irregularities that could result in a federal investigation. Rebecca entered confidently, her vibrant red suit and high heels echoing authority through the hallways. She had spent the night preparing her defense, convinced she could pin all the blame on the incompetent cleaning lady David had brought to the meeting. "Well," Rebecca began, addressing the 7 board members, "I imagine we're here to discuss yesterday's fiasco. As I warned, putting an unqualified employee in a negotiation of this magnitude was a reckless decision that is now costing the company $200 million. That was when the door opened silently. Jasmine entered wearing an impeccable gray ensemble, not borrowed, but purchased the night before with the advance the Chinese company had given her. She carried a leather briefcase and a laptop, moving with the confidence of someone who had finally found her place. "I'm sorry I'm late," Jasmine said calmly, taking a seat next to David. "I was finishing up some important information for the meeting." Rebecca's face twisted in ill-concealed irritation. "With all due respect, David, I don't understand why she's here. This is an executive meeting." "She's here," David replied coldly, "because the Chinese delegation specifically requested her presence to clarify the accusations they made." Jasmine opened her laptop with calculated movements. "Mr. Chun approached me yesterday afternoon with some specific concerns about Wellington Industries' contracting practices. Apparently, they had discovered evidence of bid rigging and sabotage against competing companies." "That's ridiculous," Rebecca exploded, her tone rising an octave. "What kind of evidence could a cleaning lady have about executive operations?" The smile that crossed Jasmine's face was soft but devastating. "The kind of evidence you gather when you're invisible for 3 years and people talk in front of you as if you don't exist." Rebecca's expression changed subtly, the first spark of real fear crossing her eyes. Jasmine connected her laptop to the projector. The first image that appeared was an internal email from Rebecca to a client, dated 6 months ago. This email, sent to Mills Corporation, contains confidential information about the Johnson Company's proposals, our direct competitor at the time. The silence in the room was deafening. Rebecca tried to interrupt, but Jasmine continued relentlessly. This second document shows how Rebecca deliberately inflated the costs of projects led by Black and Latino employees, forcing cancellations that she then attributed to the incompetence of those responsible. The screen showed spreadsheets with obvious alterations, internal emails, and security system recordings. For 3 years, Jasmine had meticulously documented every irregularity. "This is a setup," Rebecca shouted, jumping to her feet. "She's fabricating evidence to get revenge because I exposed her true position in the company." Jasmine remained calmly seated. "Mr. David, the recording I'm about to play was made by the company's own security system 8 months ago." Rebecca's voice echoed through the room's speakers. "We can't allow these types of people to think they belong in executive meeting rooms. It's a matter of maintaining appropriate standards in the company." Rebecca's face turned pale instantly. She remembered that conversation, a private discussion with Thomas about keeping the company free of unsuitable elements. And this, Jasmine continued, displaying a new recording, is from 2 weeks ago, when Rebecca deliberately instructed the receptionist to lose resumes from candidates with names that sounded too ethnic. One of the directors, Mr. Johnson, a 60-year-old black man who had been with the company for 15 years, leaned forward with a grim expression. "Rebecca, is this true?" That's out of context." Rebecca stammered, sweat beginning to form small beads on her forehead. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under to maintain company standards." "Company standards," Jasmine said softly, "include ethics, integrity, and compliance with federal anti-discrimination laws, all of which have been systematically violated over the last 18 months. David turned to Rebecca, his expression stony. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you shouldn't be fired for cause and reported to the district attorney." Rebecca looked desperately around the table, searching for an ally, a sympathetic face. She found only looks of disapproval and disgust. "You're making a terrible mistake," she whispered, her voice breaking. "She's just a resentful cleaning lady who—" "She," David interrupted authoritatively, "is our new director of international relations. And you're fired." The silence that followed was absolute. Rebecca remained standing, swaying slightly, processing that her 15-year career had ended in a matter of minutes. "Your access credentials will be revoked immediately," David continued. "Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. And Rebecca," he paused, "considering the seriousness of the evidence presented, we will be forwarding everything to the federal attorney's office." As security escorted Rebecca out, she shot Jasmine one last venomous look. "You may have won today, but that doesn't change what you really are." Jasmine met her gaze with unflinching calm. "You're right. I am exactly what I've always been, someone who watches, learns, and acts at the right moment. The difference is that now, finally, I'm where I've always belonged." 3 hours later, when the meeting ended with Jasmine officially named to her new position, David called her aside. "How did you pull this off? 3 years of evidence, recordings, documents." Jasmine smiled for the first time in days. "When you're treated like furniture, people forget that furniture has eyes and ears." Rebecca underestimated the power of invisibility, and overestimated the value of her own arrogance. At that moment, as she looked out at her new office overlooking Manhattan, Jasmine realized that the best revenge wasn't destroying Rebecca, but building something greater than she could ever imagine. The future that awaited her would be written by her own hand, and this time, no one could erase her signature. 6 months later, Jasmine Parker sat in her new office on the 38th floor of Wellington Industries, reviewing the contracts she had signed with Asian companies. Her glass desk was covered with documents in Mandarin, Cantonese, and English, negotiations that had already yielded $400 million in new contracts for the company. "Jasmine, the South Korean delegation has arrived," announced Jennifer, who now worked as her personal assistant. "They are eager to meet the woman who tripled our business in Asia in just 6 months." Through the window, Jasmine could see the city she had once observed only as an invisible cleaning lady. Now, as Director of International Relations, she had become one of Manhattan's most respected executives. Her annual salary of $300,000 had allowed her mother to receive the best treatment for diabetes, and she had been able to complete her master's degree through an executive program at Columbia University. "What about the Forbes meeting next week?" Jennifer asked, consulting her busy schedule. "Confirmed," Jasmine replied, adjusting the navy blue blazer she wore, not out of obligation, but by choice. "They want to talk about my inclusion on the list of the country's most influential young female executives." Across town, Rebecca sat in the small apartment she had rented in Queens after being evicted from her Manhattan condo. Medical bills for psychological therapy piled up on the coffee table, along with dozens of rejection letters from companies where she had applied for jobs. The federal investigation into her discriminatory practices had resulted in a $50,000 personal fine and a 5-year ban from holding executive positions at companies with federal contracts. Her name had appeared in every major business newspaper as an example of toxic leadership, making her virtually unemployable. That morning, she had seen Jasmine's photo on the cover of Businessweek magazine, smiling confidently alongside Chinese executives, with the headline, "The Translator Who Revolutionized International Business." The irony hit her like a slap in the face. Back at Wellington Industries, David had called a meeting with the entire board to announce the exceptional results for the semester. Jasmine Parker not only saved our deal with the Chinese, he declared to the roomful, she opened doors to markets we never thought possible to penetrate. Mr. Johnson, the same black director who had witnessed Rebecca's downfall, stood up to give a short speech. In my 40 years in corporate America, I have rarely seen a transformation as dramatic as the one Jasmine has brought to our company. She has proven that true talent has no color, no social class, and definitely does not hide behind prejudice. The audience applauded enthusiastically as Jasmine remained modestly seated, remembering the woman who used to clean that same boardroom just 7 months earlier. That night, in her renovated apartment on the Upper East Side, Jasmine received a call from her mother. "Honey, I saw your interview on television today. You spoke so well about second chances and perseverance." "I learned from the best," Jasmine replied, smiling. "You always told me that people can try to diminish us, but they can never diminish what we know and what we are capable of doing." During the television interview, Jasmine had been asked about Rebecca and whether she felt any resentment toward her for the way she had been treated. Her response had been precise and elegant. "Rebecca gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. She showed me exactly who I didn't want to become. Her arrogance and prejudice taught me that true power comes from lifting others up, not stepping on them." 3 weeks later, Jasmine was at Howard University, her alma mater, announcing the scholarship program she had created for low-income students who had to interrupt their studies due to financial difficulties. "No one should have to choose between taking care of their family and pursuing their dreams," she told an audience of 500 emotional students. The Second Chance program, funded in part by her own salary, had already approved 20 full scholarships for the coming semester. Rebecca, watching the ceremony online in her small apartment, turned off her computer with tears in her eyes. For the first time in months, they weren't tears of self-pity, but of something that was beginning to feel like genuine regret. Meanwhile, Jasmine returned to the office where 3 years earlier she had pushed a cleaning cart through the same hallways. Now young executives greeted her respectfully, secretaries asked her for career advice, and most importantly, she had become a mentor to 5 other employees in operational departments who showed untapped potential. "You know what's most fascinating about this whole story?" David asked Jasmine during a private conversation. "You could have used all that information about Rebecca to destroy her personally, but you chose only to expose her professional misconduct." Jasmine smiled softly. "The best revenge is never to destroy someone. It's to build something so extraordinary that it renders everything they tried to do against you irrelevant." Jasmine Parker's story proved that genuine talent, unwavering dignity, and quiet preparation can overcome any prejudice or injustice. She turned 3 years of invisibility into the greatest advantage of her career, showing that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones you don't even notice watching, learning, and preparing to shine. Rebecca tried to humiliate her based on prejudice and arrogance, but ended up being the architect of her own destruction. Jasmine taught the corporate world that true leadership does not come from titles or privileges, but from the ability to see potential where others see only limitations. If this story of overcoming adversity and justice touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that, in the end, talent and dignity always find their way to the top, no matter how many obstacles are put in their path.